That was an ugly first half of football for Penn State as they trail USC 20-6. But the Nittany Lions are still in the ball game, if you can believe that.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to a live halftime reaction of Penn State versus USC. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, or your first listen and watch out of the break here is Penn State is, I think, fortunate to only be trailing 20-6. That was an ugly first half of football. I'm looking forward to your comments to react to them briefly in about 15 to 20 minutes here for a halftime reaction show. And of course, we will go live for the post game too to recap this one. And hopefully Penn State can come back because Penn State, it should absolutely be a further score. It should be a wider margin of victory. It's been all USC. Some lucky breaks for Penn State, some different penalties that have been called against USC. The defense kind of bails the offense out when really that could have gotten out of hand the way that USC was driving, and they end up converting 2 field goals when it might have been 2 more touchdowns for USC, and then 28-6 is a lot worse to overcome than 20-6. And if you listen to any of the pre-game breakdowns that I had throughout the week, Penn State has not been able to overcome these slow starts. And for me, this isn't surprising. I kind of anticipated maybe something along the lines of 17-10 or 20-14, definitely being down behind USC. The second half adjustments is what Penn State has done well to this point, because I want to remind people, there is a full half of football left. Penn State is down by 2 scores, and they get the football to start the second half. And the best football that Penn State has played throughout this season has been in the second half of games. I always try to remind anybody that's in these conversations that when it comes to this is a new offense. This is a new defense. Okay, I get it that Penn State's almost to the mid-season point here, right? This is game 6. Penn State's 5-0. This is game 6. So this is the mid-season point here. But Andy Kotelnicki's offense is new to Penn State. Tom Allen's defense is new to Penn State. So to have these slow starts, to have to make constant adjustments and get used to all of this week in and week out is not surprising, especially when you're facing better competition on the road like this against USC. USC is not a bad football team. If there was any misconception, you kind of realize that here. USC only lost to Michigan by 3. USC went down to the wire with Minnesota. Now, granted, they shouldn't have lost those games. They did, but it was a 3-point deficit to Michigan. It's not like that game wasn't close. It was a 7-point deficit to Minnesota, even though that margin of defeat isn't really as acceptable to a Michigan team on the road. But if the ball bounces a couple of different ways for USC, this is a 5-0 team versus a 5-0 team, and it's a top 10 matchup. So USC, in my mind, is the top 25 team. Penn State, though, if we want to talk about Penn State specifically, the Nittany Lions have been less impressive on offense than they have been on defense. I feel like, Tyler Warren's the only player that exists in this offensive group. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are splitting the carries, but really there hasn't been a big explosive play by either of them. I think Singleton, he doesn't look 100% at least, and Katron Allen hasn't been able to run over anybody or do what he does best. And then the miscommunication. So I go back to, okay, new system offensively and defensively. But if you're Penn State, the miscommunications, they pile up. Those plays where it's a wrong route run or poor timing between Drew Aller and Julian Fleming, a drop, these things are going to happen. That's fine. But if you allow them to stack up on each other, then that's where an experienced team, or at least that's where a more talented team, Kent State's not going to make you pay for it. And to an extent, Illinois doesn't either. But USC will. And that's what they're doing. Defense looks absolutely exhausted. They've allowed the 20 points, don't get me wrong, but Penn State's offense has not played complimentary football to this point. I at least see more promise from the defense and what they've done to contain this USC offense, or at least not let it get out of hand, versus the offense that has not really done much. 5.7 yards per play compared to, I have the stats pulled up in front of me, 5.7 yards per play. That is one of the most important statistics when it comes to football overall. Yards per play and yards per play allowed. Penn State is getting 5.7 yards per play. Okay? Well, what is USC getting? 9.9. I knew this game was going to be a shootout type of game because if USC wants to beat Penn State, and they're sure well on their way with a 14-point advantage, that USC would have to play a game where they just put up points and speed up the tempo and go fast, take risks. Talked about how, okay, you have two tackles that are unreliable. The matchup that we talked about all week is how does somebody like an Elijah Page, who's an inexperienced redshirt freshman left tackle that's 6'7" and 320 pounds against probably one of the fastest and quickest defensive ends in football, Abdul Carter. What do you do to do that? What do you do to offset that? And then on the other side, for Deni Dennis Sutton too, you run jet sweeps, you run screen plays, you run fakes, reverses. You just do anything to get the defensive end to hesitate. Or if they're rushing aimlessly upfield, that's when you run the screen play behind them. So Woody Marks caught that screen pass. Miller Moss is running that USC game plan to a T. He's not making mistakes. Penn State isn't getting the turnovers defensively, but I still put it back on the offense. You have that great opening drive. It was a great opening drive. You go all for Penn State. You go all the way down the football field and you get inside the 5 and you don't convert. So you leave 4 points out there. So this should be a 20 to 10, maybe a 20 to 13 deficit in reality. I could look at it either way. I think USC has left points on the field. Penn State has definitely left points on the field. But if you're going to sustain those 10, 12, 15 play drives, Penn State, you got to convert. You've been down to the red zone twice and you come away with 2 field goals. That's really the difference. But in terms of overall total yards, USC's outgaining them on the ground, which is surprising, very much surprising. I talked about how, Penn State is better in the trenches. Penn State should absolutely be winning the point of attack when it comes to either ground game. And it's not because Woody Marks isn't talented, and we're figuring out just how good and how much potential a Quentin Joyner has as he scored both touchdowns for USC, all the touchdowns in this game at 20-6. So to see the rushing difference of 147 by USC to 71 for Penn State, that's egregious. I'm not saying it should be flipped, but it should be somewhere in the middle. If it was a 110 to 100, okay, USC has the advantage. But if you look at the complete and total offense, Penn State is able to move the football in increments, but I'm wondering about these explosive plays. Andy Kotelnicki was brought in for explosiveness. The offense is able to match the tempo, should be able to match the tempo of a USC, go toe-to-toe with them in a shootout, and it feels like the days of old, the days of a year ago, where Penn State's offense is playing within a phone booth, and they're getting 5 yards to Tyler Warren, 3 yards to Katron Allen, maybe a quick out to a Liam Clifford. And then when they do try to open up the offense, there's a drop pass by Julian Fleming. There's a miscommunication on the route and the ball's behind Fleming. There's an interception. The offense is more so to blame than the defense. I want to check in on your comments before we look ahead to the second half, keys to the second half, and looking at how Penn State can come back, because Penn State's best football is ahead. The second half adjustments are key for Penn State. They are definitely not out of this game. I did not see this as doom and gloom. It could have been a lot worse. USC could be up by more points, but they're not. You drive down the field, you score a touchdown, it's 20-13. Brand new ball game. You should be down by a lot more, but hey, take what you can get. It's the game of football. Take advantage of that. Check out in your comments. Oh my goodness, the chat is lively, and I love to see it. Kyle K says, if we score on our red zone possessions, this is a 14-17 game with our ball to start the second half. Yes, Penn State is closer in this game than meets the eye. Absolutely. Kyle followed up with 20-14. Dude, we're cooked. It could be worse. It could be worse. I will say this, Penn State's offense they don't need it all back at once. And I hope that by me saying, okay, there's a lack of explosive plays, that Penn State just doesn't go all in and try to get those points as quickly as possible. The defense needs a break. The defense absolutely needs a break going into the second half. It's pathetic. Yeah, it was. That first half was it was disappointing because the slow starts have been a conversation about it, and you still have the slow start. Granted, I expected it. They're out in Los Angeles. They took a bus trip to West Virginia, and then they played 3 home games back to back to back with a bye week in there. This is not surprising that the slow start is happening, given the fact that they already deal with slow starts. Always been a second half team. Couldn't agree more. We need to be pounding the ball constantly. I wonder why they are a little hesitant to run the football as much, because it seems like there's a little bit of an identity issue right now, because that's what Penn State wants to do. Penn State wants to run the ball, control the pace of the game, and now USC holds all of the cards. When you're trailing, Penn State is not going to run as much. So the first drive is indicative of the second half, is indicative of how the rest of the game is going to go. If this is 20-13, they drive down the field and give or take maybe 8 to 12 plays. That's what they're looking for, to give that, because the defense looked gassed at the end of the first half. That did not look good. Defensive linemen, hands on their hips, not ready. I think it was Javon J. Thomas and Alonzo Ford were in there for that final drive by USC, and they were just waiting for the play to happen. Guys are jogging off, and I get it. I think that's strategic with the way that James Franklin's making late substitutions just to give his guys a break. Hey, all's fair in love and war here, and in football. And if the referees are going to allow you to give you that time to make that substitution, take all the time in the world. You might say, James Franklin's, kind of cheating the system in this case. Use it. If the referees are going to let you take that time to substitute players in, give your players on the football field a break. Offense is getting way too cute. Absolutely agree. I don't know why you're showing that in the first half. I don't know why you were Bo Prabula package, Tyler Warren on a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 1 on the first drive of the game. That's the stuff you use in the fourth quarter when you're either trying to put a team away or you absolutely need this conversion. Did you really need that third down? I mean, hindsight's 2020, so yes, but did you really need to go all in for that 3rd and short conversion? You didn't have a simple handoff to Singleton or Allen to get that 3rd down play call instead of drawing up a trick play to Tyler Warren. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I pointed this out on X. If you're not following along the game, the conversation that I'm having on X, Twitter, and I already pointed it out, I like the Bo Prabula formations. I like the packages, but the timing of them are bad. The Tyler Warren trick plays are not timed well. You don't need, when you're in a road situation like this, when you're in a road game and Drew Aller needs to get comfortable, you need those quick, easy passes. I understand for the first couple of drives to get Drew into rhythm on the first real road game, and it's not that West Virginia wasn't, but I'm talking, 6-hour plane trip versus a 3-hour bus ride. Get Drew Aller into rhythm, and when you have Bo Prabula coming in, he's not paying attention to the play clock, and you have Tyler Warren taking some snaps, that takes more plays away from Drew getting into rhythm, and I'm more worried about Aller feeling comfortable in this game than, Bo Prabula getting 5 yards on a fake handoff here on the quarterback keeper. Jacob says, got way too vanilla after showing everything on the first drive that should have ended in 7. Absolutely. Let's see here. I imagine that's Aller, just a bit of a typo here. If Aller has any designs on going to the NFL, someone needs to have a talk with him and tell him to stay in school and get your degree. It's pathetic. Franklin should be fired immediately. See, I'm not ready to sell out completely on the team like that. Because Penn State football is trailing 20-6 at half, when there's a whole nother half to play. Penn State trailed Bowling Green, and I get it, that's a MAC team, but Penn State won that game. I'm not ready to sell out and say that, hey, just because a team is trailing doesn't mean a second half comeback can't happen. Look at Alabama, Georgia. That game was completely out of hand. Georgia made it a ball game, should have won that ball game, didn't. But my point is that Penn State is best at making second half adjustments, and it's still football, right? Anything can happen. Penn State starts with the football, and if they score, now they need to score a touchdown. They need at least points. If they don't come away with a field goal, if it's a quick 3 and out, or if they don't get on the other side of the 50, that is not good. And then my confidence level is going to slowly diminish throughout the game. Fleming is trash. Fleming is not trash. Julian Fleming is not trash. What Julian Fleming and Drew Aller's biggest problem is they are not on the same page. They have not played enough football together. These are two veteran football players that are coming into... you look, if you want to look at that as an excuse, this is what's happening. These guys have not played a lot of football together. This is a new offensive system. Fleming's been at Ohio State. Drew Aller's been at Penn State. These two guys are trying to come together, and I think they can be a really good quarterback wide receiver duo, but the timing's off. There's miscommunications. I've seen Julian Fleming run the wrong bit of an option route, or Drew Aller's anticipating him to run the other leg of the option route, and that's why you're seeing throws behind him. These are timing issues. These aren't accuracy or Julian Fleming can't catch. It is literally timing and rhythm. I think Penn State, in its case now, that's saved for a different conversation, but the bye week after this game is going to be so important for the offense because it will help them establish that rhythm. But you got to think about the USC game first. I don't want to try to get ahead of myself in this case, right? You got to come back against USC before we even talk about a bye week or what the offense can do with its chemistry, right? Y'all think Penn State can come back? I think they can. Obviously, it's a matter of if they will. Penn State is in a position to come back in this game. Penn State needs to be able to capitalize on USC's weaknesses, and they need to make the necessary second half adjustments. But we've seen that Penn State does not struggle with second half adjustments. They are much better. West Virginia, Bowling Green, Illinois, all of those, better late than never, I suppose, but the second half adjustments do happen. Franklin can't beat a good team. I mean, Illinois was top 20. A loss is a loss. I understand, but I don't think that Penn State obviously everybody struggles with better competition. This is a road game in Los Angeles. The slow start does not surprise me, but Penn State is in position to make a comeback. We are cooked, chat. The game's not over until it's over for me. That's just my humble opinion. I thought Penn State had a dominant offensive line. Not on this show. This show understands that Penn State is playing better than advertised. I don't blame James Franklin for being a head coach. What are you supposed to do? Go out there and criticize your offensive line and say, yeah, they're only average. Are you going to do that? James Franklin is going to applaud his offensive line and give them as much confidence as possible. On this show, we acknowledge that, yes, they're playing better than expectations in the preseason, because that is true. I thought Penn State's offensive line was going to be the weakest link with the linebackers, and so far that's not the case. Offensive line has performed well enough, but they have not been challenged, and they're still average. Drew Shelton has his issues. I think that Anthony Donko, Sal Wormley, all these guys are really making mistakes. Venga Ioane has been the most consistent, and they line him up in the slot. But I think Venga Ioane has been the best offensive lineman to this point. I'm trying to keep up with the comments section here. We are going to wrap up in just a matter of minutes because Penn State USC will be kicking off for the second half soon. So enjoy the second half of the game. Hopefully Penn State is able to mount that comeback and win the game, and we'll have a different tone on the live post-game show. I do want to remind people, after the game is over, live post-game show after the fact. Let's see. The officials have changed the face of the game. That pass interference call was BS. The play down at the goal line where, Julian Fleming got called for the pass interference. It's tough because they're in. So that play, I think, is legal if they're outside of the red zone, maybe. Or it's not because they're in the red zone, but it's just such a more crowded area. And Julian Fleming more or less has his arm extended. I'm not saying that Fleming's having a good game or making excuses for him for the drops and some miscommunications with Drew Aller. I'm not ready to say that Julian Fleming's the worst wide receiver that I've seen. Is he making mistakes? Is he having a bad football game? Yes, all these things can be true. Julian Fleming's a fifth-year, sixth-year veteran. He needs to be able to sell that better. That's called on him. Don't extend your arm, get in the way, look like a decoy, but instead you're not selling the fact that you're trying to run a legitimate route, because that's a great play call that should have ended in 7, and because of your sixth-year veteran, you only come away with 3. Kotelnicki is a stud. Stop trying to overprove it. I do think that Penn State is getting away from fundamentals here, and I'm not entirely sure why. I really, really don't. Go Lions. Go Lions. We can wear this team out up front. What I wonder about USC is what USC's game plan is going to be. So the keys to Penn State getting back into the second half and making this a ball game. Let's talk about that as we'll wrap it up here. Game's getting ready to start. Pick back up for the second half. Penn State needs to score on this drive. A field goal's not ideal, but it's something. You need to cut into the deficit, and you need to give your defense an extended break. At least 8 plays, 10, 12. Don't chew all of the clock, because USC, we've seen that USC can score just like that. They can score in a matter of seconds. For Penn State, drive down the field, ideally score a touchdown, make this a 20-13 game, and then you have to hold USC to a field goal or force a 3-and-out at some point. Don't allow USC to have a big explosive play, because then if it's 27-13, you're right back in the same spot. And now, instead of having 15 minutes to start the third quarter, you're down to 7, 8, 6, 7, 6, or 5. And then the clock becomes your enemy and not just USC. Warren ready for war. Hey, Warren's shown everything. It feels like nobody else exists in this Penn State offense. It's been the Tyler Warren show the entire time. But I think that's where we'll cap it off here, because from the sound of it, again, I'm not near my TV right now, but Penn State and USC have started the second half. I thank you for tuning into this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, and we'll recap it all with another live post-game show here on the YouTube channel. Thanks for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions.